as you walk through things, as you go through your own personal suffering. That's right.
And so, yeah, let's be positive about healing, but let's also accept the fact that sometimes God doesn't heal.
Yeah.
And yet he can use it. I was given this CD the other day of Nick Vucic, I think is how you pronounce it. And it's an amazing video. I mean, he was born without arms and just without legs, basically, and just a few toes of one foot. And it starts by showing, and he is narrating it, of how he gets around his house, and he's done everything he can, and even so, for instance, he's got his comb or his hairbrush attached to, so he can get underneath and brush his hair. And I looked at this and I thought, wow, here is a guy that has taken that disability and has tried to live as normal life as possible. And then, of course, in the meeting, and he goes and preaches, and you start, and what a testimony. I'm sure he has major problems at times, but what a testimony that is. And there are many others. Of course, many know Joni's story, and the difficulty she went through to begin with, and the difficulty of other people relating to her, of course. But what testimonies there are.
I know, and many people who learn many disabilities, both physical and learning disabilities, would say that some people in some churches, they feel very uncomfortable.
Yes.
Because everybody only wants to see you healed. Yeah. And they come forward. If you go to a church in a wheelchair, it's almost like you've got to get out of the wheelchair, even though the church may have seen no one getting out of a wheelchair. They have to pray for you.
Yeah.
Rather than accepting you as a normal human being,
Amen,
and accepting you as a whole person, and recognizing that you may have some disabilities, and therefore the church needs to make up for it. So if you can't walk in, then you may need someone to push you in. If you can't wheel yourself in the wheelchair. So I mean, shouldn't, but we often feel that we have this model of perfection, and that's what everybody should attend to.
Yeah. Let's set this in, because we'll come back to, because the way as a church we are to act and react towards people with disabilities. I just picked up these few statistics, which again just shows there are an estimated 10 million disabled people in Britain. Now, that's overall, and we'll break that down a little bit in just a minute. I mean, but that word covers so much, of course.
1 in 5 of the population.
There are over 6.8 million disabled people of working age, which represents 90% of the working population. 44% of adults over the age of 50 have a disability. And there are 770,000 disabled children under the age of 16 in the UK, which equates to 5% of all under 16s. Now, figures can be anything, but what you take out of those figures is there are a lot of people that have a disability of one degree or another. Therefore, if I am passionate as a Christian in communicating the gospel, if I am passionate in wanting people to become involved in local church, not just so the numbers grow, but so that we minister one to another, we've got to understand disability and understand what to do. So, Mervyn, can you first of all break down a little bit as to what we refer to as disabilities?
Well, of course, disability, as we've already said, covers a wide thing. You may have hard of hearing in one ear, and that's obviously a disability to you.
Yes.
And for some people, not being able to hear in one ear is a huge problem. For others, it doesn't affect them at all. So mostly when we refer to disabilities, we reflect them into physical ones and those with mental disabilities, not just mental health, but those who've had some degree of brain damage, whether they were born with it or whether they got it through life. And then we call those learning disabilities. They used to be called mentally defective or mentally retarded, but that's the wrong expression because it labels them. It just describes a whole people with learning disabilities. But of course, with learning disabilities, that again is a huge area, because it goes from people who have difficulties learning right the way to people who can't learn anything because of their degree of brain damage. And so when we talk about people with disabilities, like this 1 in 5 figure, it sounds huge,
but
it actually, we tend to talk much more about those who need either special help or somebody else to help them, or those who struggle in their own situations and find ways, like this gentleman, who's obviously not got any limbs but finds a way of managing independently, and therefore has to have artificial helps to do it.
I know your main work has been in people with learning disabilities, so we're going to get on to talk about those. But just maybe for a minute, if you can look at it from the other aspect. I mean, we have the Disability Discrimination Act come through, and of course that meant all churches, changed their doorways, and so a wheelchair could get in, and the ramps and all that. And so you can do all of that, and that just costs money, which may or may not be a problem in some churches. But once you've spent the money, you've got it. But that seems to me just the beginning, because once the wheelchair, as it were, has come up the ramp, and there is a person in that wheelchair. Do you just see the wheelchair? I remember, I was fascinated one, but I mean, quite naturally. I mean, nobody ever taught me to do it, but when people at exhibitions, that people in wheelchair came up to the stand, I would get down to their level, and I just didn't think anything. And one person said to me, "Thank you so much."
Yeah, absolutely.
And I realised how bad they felt of people standing over them, just little things like that. But sure, how do we begin to change our attitude as Christians towards these people?
Yeah. Well, I think this is a huge subject in itself.
Absolutely.
Because most people with some form of disability would feel that people tend to do two things. They either totally ignore them and almost pretend they're not there because they don't know what to do, or they mother them and they treat them as children. And I talk about adults now, and certainly don't treat them as a human being. And people who learn disabilities tend to be very sensitive in this, quite rightly so, in this area. And churches have people. We all need to learn a bit more. Very often this is due to ignorance. We don't understand a simple thing like you were talking, that when we stand up talking to one another, we're eye to eye. But actually, if you can't stand up, you do need eye to eye contact. Let's come down to their level. And it's just simple things about how you communicate and what's important in communicating. It's like, I often say, if you want to know how good your church is, at managing people with disabilities, how many people have you got in your church? If you could think of perhaps none or one, maybe the church is not very welcoming. It may have the level access raised, it may have the wider doors, but it may not have the right relationship and the way it treats people. You often find churches that cater properly and do a lot in informing and developing work amongst the people with severe disabilities of one form or another. They often have a whole group there, and this is my experience.
I mean, we've already talked about the extreme of trying to get them healed, and there may well be a place, obviously in a loving church atmosphere, that we are praying for those people. As I say, providing they know we're not putting any pressure on them, or we're not promising anything. We're just, from our hearts, we're inquiring of God. God, would you do that? But if God doesn't help, what should our goal be for that person? Okay, let's just look at with the physical side first of all. What should our goal be? Here they are, they're coming in and they're sensing a warmth, a care. Yes, they are being welcomed in. What should our goal be to see for that person?
Well, just to see them as a normal human being rather than seeing them as a disabled human being. I mean, you have to manage it in such a way that, like we were talking about, if you're talking to them, you come down to the level, but that doesn't mean to say you then talk to them as a talking down business, because that, as a parent would talk to its child.
Yes.
And I think it is, I think a lot of people, certainly that's what people with learning disabilities would say, and people physically disabled, that some churches and people don't know how to handle it.